Webinar in our Big Five series, A Clear View of Reading. We're so happy you joined us this evening for our final webinar in vocabulary. This series has focused on the 5 essential components in reading development. So tonight our focus is going to be on the final component, vocabulary. I am Janet Pedrazi, the the director of academic content here at Lexplore, and also a public school teacher for over 23 years. If you're not familiar with our product, the Lexplore Reading Assessment, or you haven't joined us in our webinar series, we are a 3-minute reading assessment that uses AI and eye tracking to assess a child's reading ability. Uniquely, we use the power of eye tracking to assess silent reading as well. So before we get started, I'd like to just talk about some housekeeping items. We do mute our participants for clear audio purposes. If you have any questions this evening, you can put them in the Q&A section and they will be answered there, or they will be saved to the end of the webinar and we can address them there. We will also send you a link to the recording, and it will also be available on the website. And then at the end, the last slide will have my contact information. If you have any questions about the webinars, our free resources, or our Lexplore reading assessment, please feel free to reach out. Now, let's get started. Okay, in each webinar, we have been focusing on one of the 5 essential components of reading and development. And today we will be focusing on our final component, vocabulary. We'll begin with discussing a little bit about the importance of vocabulary, but then we'll give ideas on ways to incorporate vocabulary throughout the day in all content areas. The 5 essential components of reading instruction are phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. Each of these components should be taught explicitly, including vocabulary. Okay, so this is the slide I've been using in the past few webinars to show how these components work together. Today, we will focus specifically on vocabulary and its relationship to the other components. Look how it interacts with phonics, decoding, fluency, and comprehension. Developing vocabulary is essential to reading development and proficiency. First, let's look at phonics and decoding. These are the skills and the rules for sound symbol relationships. Students learn to identify the letters or letter combinations and then translate them into sounds to blend to read the words. It is much easier to decode a word that is familiar than a word that is completely unknown. When a student knows the meaning of a word they are decoding, the context plays a role in aiding a smooth and easy decoding experience. If the words are completely new to the reader, decoding those words takes much more effort. The development of phonics and vocabulary skills then leads to fluency. Children must be reading fluently to establish meaning from a text. Knowing more words aids in fluency and leads to comprehension. Students must have some background knowledge and vocabulary on the topic they're reading to gain understanding. So here you can see how the components are dependent on each other for reading proficiency. So why is vocabulary important? When students are not familiar with words within a text, it creates gaps in their understanding. Being familiar or understanding basic meanings of words from specific contents or words with multiple meanings facilitates comprehension. Students with limited background knowledge or experiences have smaller vocabularies, making it challenging to comprehend texts of varying complexities. Also, knowledge is cumulative. So the more a student knows about a topic, the broader their related vocabulary will be. This provides the stronger knowledge foundation to build on while they're reading on that specific topic. Also, they will have a knowledge of the content, so when they approach an unknown word, the context can provide meaning. If a student has very little knowledge on a topic, the context cannot aid in finding the meaning. Also, vocabulary aids in communicating effectively. Students with a broader vocabulary base can communicate with greater detail and precision. Specific academic language is necessary for understanding and answering questions in school. These academic vocabulary words need to be taught explicitly. So, how is vocabulary acquired? Vocabulary is acquired in two ways. We can explicitly teach vocabulary words, or children acquire new vocabulary through experiences such as reading, conversations, excursions or trips, exposures to professions and trades, and more. So, if vocabulary is mostly acquired through experience, we need to carefully consider students who may not have the same opportunities and exposure to these language developing experiences. The research of Hart and Risley states that by age 3, the children in professional families would have heard more than 30 million words. The children in working class families, 20 million words, and the children in welfare families, 10 million. Let's think about how those lack of language experiences affect learning. The conversations and literacy experiences between our youngest children and their adult caregivers is a crucial piece to their language development. Homes rich in literacy experiences are exposing learners to new words and language. Students coming from homes lacking in these experiences are at a serious disadvantage academically, especially in reading development. So we were talking about the direct and indirect ways of acquiring vocabulary, and I call this approach my direct indirect approach. It's a little bit of a combination. I make a point at home and at school to incorporate vocabulary words whenever I can, and I'm always looking for opportunities to slide some vocabulary in instruction, or even with just my children at home, which they have totally caught on to. So this is a sample video from our video series, Lunch with Lexplore. And I'm just going through with my son, Ben, how to do these vocabulary walk-bys, which I've always done in my home and in my classroom. Hi, welcome back to Lunch Break at Lexplore. I'm Janet, a kindergarten teacher and a mom of 2.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm in 5th grade.
And we have some at-home learning tips for you today. We're bringing it back to vocabulary. Vocabulary is so very, very important for reading comprehension, especially reading comprehension within the different content curriculums like science and math. It's also super important for writing. Students can better express themselves when they have a more vast vocabulary. So today we're going to talk about my favorite or vocabulary walk-bys. I use them at home and at school, especially during center time when children are building and working more freely and I'm buzzing around the room with many things to do. I like to engage with students quickly by just walking by and throwing in some vocabulary words. So Ben was busy here with the magnetiles today. Magnetiles are a great material to work with. You can use vocabulary, so many vocabulary words, but the most important thing is we are using vocabulary words in a meaningful context. That means it actually has some meaning to them, and then it's the kind of learning that sticks. When they're using the vocabulary words within a meaningful context, then it's more likely to stick and for them to remember the word and to better understand it. So let's take a look. These are vocabulary words we use for our outside vocabulary activity, but I threw a few more on here. Two-dimensional and three-dimensional. Those are such tricky concepts. I'm actually in the process of teaching my kindergarten class right now the difference between two-dimensional and three-dimensional. I love magnetiles for teaching this concept. Two-dimensional.
flat, right? Three-dimensional takes up space. So if I'm walking by children working, I would say, which one of these is two-dimensional, Ben? And how do you know that one's the two-dimensional? Because it is flat. And then we use the two-dimensional shapes to create surfaces for three-dimensional shapes, right? Yes. What shape did we use to create the surface for this pyramid? Triangular prism. A triangle, right? Okay, take a look over here. So now we are going to take a look at his tower that he built. I'm walking by. I might be carrying the laundry basket, and I would stop and say, hey, Ben, if symmetrical means the same on both sides, is your tower symmetrical? Yes, it is, because the two triangular towers are the same on both sides. Also, if you took a picture of it and took that picture and folded it in half, the two sides would line up perfectly. They would line up perfectly. So that is a great explanation on how you know that this tower is symmetrical. It's the same on both sides. So not only did I explain the definition of the word, then I provided my child the opportunity to use that word and create an explanation, right? So there are so many different perimeter, area, vertex, measurement, length, capacity.
So I'm going to stop there for the sake of time, but you can watch this video in its entirety on our website. And there's also an outdoor vocabulary walk by version as well. But the point is that we will be focusing on throughout is that vocabulary instruction, though this is a very informal approach, and we will go over some formal approaches, but vocabulary instruction should be woven throughout the entire day in every way possible. Just to build that background knowledge and to give our students that foundation they need for better understanding. So what is background knowledge? When students are reading a text, they are entering the experience with some level of background knowledge, or this knowledge is the knowledge they have already acquired through life experiences. This level of knowledge allows the reader to learn and build upon a foundation. Knowledge is cumulative, so learners build upon what they have already learned. So when we read, we're activating, supporting, and building upon what we already know. The more you know, the more you can learn. So in the earlier years, students learn to read, but as we know, in the later elementary grades, students read to learn. In order to deeply understand the text, a student must make inferences and draw conclusions. We hear, that's a huge piece of comprehension, but these mental actions require a student to draw upon what they already know and to use information from the text to draw those conclusions. So if you're lacking in some experiential knowledge, that this could hinder the ability and actually decrease your comprehension rate. So how does this relate to vocabulary? Well, if you relate vocabulary to knowledge, you can see how the cumulative exponential action works. Readers learn unknown words by analyzing the context to decipher meaning, right? So vocabulary development and comprehension are reciprocal in that way. Larger vocabularies make it easier to understand text, and understanding the text makes it easier for readers to derive meaning from those unknown words. If the reader has a limited experience with the topic of the text, analyzing the context will be very difficult. If you think about indirect vocabulary acquisition as building an upside down pyramid, think about pyramid 1. For pyramid 1, you have 4 bricks laid as the foundation. And for pyramid 2, you have 24 bricks laid for the foundation. Which would provide a better foundation for a bigger building? Well, as educators and parents, we need to think about how to lay more bricks for our readers. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at how a vocabulary word goes from the first little exposure to a long-term memory. This is when it would when it's in the long-term memory is when it's added to that background knowledge for continuous learning and knowledge building. So at first, a student may be exposed to a word by reading it or hearing it. Now, if there is an action taken or several actions taken, mental actions on it, then meaning like the word is highlighted for discussions or analysis, it goes into the working memory area of the brain. Here is where the word is processed with that prior knowledge, that background knowledge for deeper understanding. So they use that, so that part of the brain uses the bits that they already know and then combining this new information to build. So if there are several opportunities for engagement and processing the word, the word can land in the long-term memory portion. So let's go back and think about those at-risk students who lack in the language experiences necessary for establishing adequate vocabulary bank. Let's also think about those students who have learning differences like dyslexia, who may need varied exposures that get to get that word to that working memory stage. Although all the students will benefit greatly from explicit vocabulary instruction, these are the students who will struggle without it. We will talk about how to structure vocabulary lessons to provide ample opportunity for processing and storing these new words. So, how do we teach vocabulary? In addition to teaching words and definitions directly, vocabulary lessons and activities should require students to think deeply about the meanings and applications. Close reads, of course, are the perfect opportunity to stop and analyze the possible meaning of a word. But then, but then the word should be confirmed with a definition. In addition, students should be given ample practice with the word. Vocabulary lessons can be a ton of fun, and the more you do it, the more it will come naturally and more efficiently. Lessons should be relevant to the content or theme, so the students can use those vocabulary words in their discussions in class and activities, in their group learning environments, in writings and game playing throughout the day. Vocabulary should be woven into every lesson. When teaching a specific content area, vocabulary should be highlighted in the beginning of the lessons and then used within the content instruction and with follow-up activities. Language and discussion experiences with these new words should always be infused throughout the lessons of the day. Most of us have heard of the gradual release method of teaching. It is usually associated with content related to concepts, and traditional vocabulary instruction is usually thought of in a secondary sense and sometimes considered not as worthy of this such time or effort. But after rethinking vocabulary instruction and planning vocabulary instruction in this way, it begins to come so naturally and is an easy supplement to ELA, math, or any of the content area lessons. Let's take a look at how it works. The gradual release method would begin with the teacher highlighting the word within the text or the lesson and prompt the students in analyzing for meaning. Together, the teacher and the students can confirm their findings with a definition and discuss other uses of the word. I believe this next step is the most essential in solidifying the word in the memory. The students work together in groups or pairs to complete a discussion prompt or an activity requiring them to use the word multiple times. When working with pairs or groups, there always needs to be an accountability piece. So, if working with partners, each partner is expected to perform the task while the other checks for accuracy and completion. We will talk about different strategies you can use in all stages of the gradual release method. Okay, so back in 2002, Beck and McCowan and Kukan suggested that there were 3 tiers of vocabulary. Tier 1, this includes the very basic words like sight words that only have one meaning and occur in early reading experiences. Words like happy, chair, cat, and red are all Tier 1 words. They do not require explicit instruction. Tier 2 words are a bit more complex. They can have multiple meanings and can be found across domains or or environments. And they're usually found in adult conversations. And These are the ones that can present the problems for readers who only encounter them while reading. Because these lack the redundancy of the tier 1 words, they are more difficult to acquire. They require direct instruction and practice within a context. These words are crucial for reading comprehension. Tier 3 words are those low frequency words that are specific to a domain. For example, like isotope. That's a word taught specific to chemistry, serving a specific purpose within that content area. They are necessary for building knowledge and content within that domain. Okay, so some of the most important tier 2 words are those academic vocabulary words, or otherwise known as critical vocabulary words. They're found in our standards and our writing prompts and our test questions. Have you ever had a moment in school? I always think back to this, and when you have, like, you read a passage which you pretty much understood, but then you didn't understand the question. Far too often, students read the text and basically understand it, but they can't complete the test or the assignment because they don't understand what is being asked. Let's take a look at some of the words I'm referring to. Sometimes you hear them called critical vocabulary words or academic vocabulary. Knowing these words aids in building confidence and academic success for young learners. They need to be taught these words at the earliest stages, explicitly, and with ample opportunity to use them in daily learning. Assessing for deep understanding of these words should be planned and intentional to ensure understanding and success. So in kindergarten, I focus on compare and contrast, describe, distinguish, identify, and retell. Um, Along with many others, but those are the ones I focus on in the beginning. I put this link in the footer there of this slide of a great resource I found. This lists all of the critical nouns and verbs and also organizes them by grade levels, which is so very helpful. So if you just Google critical vocabulary words, it comes up as teaching the critical vocabulary words. It's like one of the second or third entries. It's a wonderful list to refer to. Okay, so anchor charts. Anchor charts are huge. I always begin teaching these critical words with a prepared anchor chart to reference during instruction. I write the definition, then I try to include some kind of picture to help the students visualize the concepts. Every time we are using the skill or word, I refer to that chart. I want the students to attach the action that we're doing at that moment with the word. For example, if we're doing a close read and we're determining what is similar between the characters, I refer to the chart for the word compare, and then I read the definition and directly state that we are comparing. Then in math or science, I do the same thing with that same word, and I make sure I keep going back to that same chart. So then they begin to realize the importance of these critical words and how they apply across all of the content areas. Also, before independent practice, I refer to the chart so the students make those connections to the prior learning experiences to deepen their understanding of the word. So anchor charts are a huge part of teaching our critical vocabulary words. Now we're going to talk about some other practices that we can use these practices for all vocabulary words, critical or just regular tier 2 words. Vocabulary discussions and instructional practices can be woven into all areas to enhance vocabulary instruction. Sticky notes within a text is a great way to remind you to include them. Like think alouds for vocabulary instruction can be specifically planned and or improvised. Think alouds are a great way to include vocabulary development in all content areas. For example, when examining a photograph in a text and reading a caption, a teacher might do a think aloud to explain how that photograph helps them determine the meaning of a tier 2 or tier 3 word within the text. Um, then there is a divergent questioning. It's important to go far beyond just asking students for the meaning of the word. And I did demonstrate that actually in the video. Asking divergent questions about a word requires students to think more deeply by applying the meaning. For example, a teacher may ask, if I have an ample amount of food, do I have enough food or not enough food? And then students are required to think about how the meaning of the word applies to the context. Synonyms. Teachers can use synonyms to ensure that students understand the meaning of words. For example, a teacher might say, I see this penguin is molting or losing old feathers to make room for new ones. So teachers can also stop while reading to ask the students to provide synonyms for challenging words in the text. So instead of stopping and offering a definition, it's good if you want to keep the flow, you can just do a think aloud with and include the synonym. Remembering remembering words and their meanings can be challenging and often require several steps. When students use them within a context and have several exposures, they are more likely to remember and use the word. So, partner share discussions provide an opportunity for students to use words within the context in a safe environment where they may be more likely to take risks because they're working with just one or two peers as opposed to answering a question or speaking in front of the whole group or even just the teacher. So, this model provides immediate feedback and support from the partner. It is important that clear routines and expectations are communicated to students to ensure total engagement. So, students need to demonstrate good listening by making eye contact, sitting still, and offering comments or feedback. Students also need to know when to switch speakers and listeners. This can happen with a signal or simply when the speaker is finished. Partner selection should be intentional and in line with the objective. So sometimes it's most useful to select heterogeneous partners and ask the stronger student to give the first example. This provides a structure of support for the other student to imitate. Engagement can be monitored by circulating through the pairs to offer suggestions and highlight comments that are on point. Now, let's take a closer look at these partner share models that can be used. And I also want to just highlight the partner sharing anchor chart that is featured here. That's one of the many that can be found in our free resources on lexplore.com. We do have other versions of the partner sharing for you. So let's take a look. And excuse me. And post a list of words, excuse me, sorry. Post a list of words and ask the student to take turns making sorry. This can make a lot of modeling and gradual release before students can do it on their own. Model by saying saunter is to walk, as giggle is to laugh. Create a sentence frame for students to reference. So it's important um, to create those frames or those talk prompts and have them. Sometimes I put them out in front of the partners and have them actually like point to the words as they're reading and filling in the blanks. Explanations. You ask the students to take turns explaining a phenomenon or an event to their partner, and I usually post a list of words for the students that they are required to use. So they would have their vocabulary words in front of them, and sometimes I even provide a checklist to have them check off as they go. For example, the words you might post the words evaporation and precipitation and ask the students to take turns explaining the water cycle, making sure to use the posted words. The peer listeners now should always be monitoring to be sure the speaker uses the words in the list accurately. And that's the huge piece to partner shares and partner activities is making sure that monitoring is in place. And the anchor charts definitely help with that. So here we have talk prompts. Post that talk prompt. The more posting you have, the better. It's a better reference tools for the students to kind of keep them on track. Make sure you have that vocabulary word posted, and ask the students to take turns completing the prompt. For example, if the word is elated, the teacher may post, "I feel elated when," and be sure the peers are monitoring and checking for accuracy, meaning that they're using the word properly. They also can be encouraged to add more to their partner statements. And then the critical verbs or critical words. Um, Consistent checking and understanding of these critical words that I had mentioned earlier, um, they're and the essential academic verbs will ensure the better test and classwork performance. So always post the anchor chart to refer to before letting the partners begin. And then using the critical words in discussions will help students identify them and apply meaning and develop a deeper understanding of each word. For example, a teacher may ask the students to compare and contrast the two characters in a story. So model and explain that they should each offer a similarity and one difference. The peer listeners should monitor to be sure that the speaker has met that criteria. And that creating that partner routine takes a lot of practice. It definitely does not happen successfully in the very first try. So all of those routine building experiences happen over time with lots of anchor charts. Act it out. Vocabulary instruction can be fun. I love this one. Acting out words is a multi-sensory approach that will help students apply and retain those meanings. This can take place in the form of a game like charades or as a whole group. For example, if the words were meadow and stampede, the teacher can position the students in a line to act out the scenario. The buffalo herd was grazing when all of a sudden they noticed a lion. What happens? And then the students, I'm just remembering because I actually did this with my class, and that's why I'm laughing, because they had so much fun with it. The students then pretend to stampede, and of course they do that in place or just with a little bit of space. And these fun activities can be done as a part of a lesson or during transitional times. We're getting ready for recess and we have 2 minutes, so we stop to do a little stampede activity. Now, how would this apply to critical vocabulary words? Well, the class can help create some body movements for each word. For example, compare. Hold out your two hands and act as if you're comparing the two items. Or analyze. Pretend that you're holding something and break it into parts. These are fun and engaging, and it's another way to reinforce those tricky words and their meanings. So every time you're pointing over to that anchor chart for compare, you can also put your hands out and have the class do that little motion. Now, graphic organizers, of course, are a huge an important tool when teaching vocabulary. These tools provide the students with the opportunity to organize those various bits of information about a word in a visual way that helps develop a deeper understanding and helps them remember the meaning. Now, this is the Freyer model, which is very common. In this example, I found, I think, on education.com. Um, and it includes areas for definitions, illustrations, examples, non-examples, and more. Now, I use a more simpler version with my class, but towards the end of the year, we can all work, we work towards this with more detail. But these tools can serve many purposes. I use them for whole group learning, small group, independent word practice, and I also use them after I use them in whole group. They serve a great purpose as an anchor chart. So they're very useful. Um, Close read graphic organizers. These graphic organizers are a great way to encourage good comprehension habits while also developing vocabulary and understanding the text. They are also a great habit forming tool. We want our readers to pay close attention to those unfamiliar words in the text. and practice analyzing the context for meaning and process it in other ways in their mind to add to their vocabulary bank. These organizers can include the word, definition, sentence, the sentence in the text where the student found the word, the page, a space to create an additional sentence or an illustration, or they can just be much simpler. This habit can also be encouraged by using a journal instead of an organizer. This specific organizer was created by Christine Nanini on Teachers Pay Teachers. But I also just have my son use his vocabulary journal, and he keeps it with him when he's reading, especially a more complex text, and he writes the words, and then we use dictionary.com. So it's just it's a good habit building graphic organizer. Okay. Um, so the vocabulary development can be and should be continued at home. Frequently, our families frequently offer families information on the importance of meaningful discussions and how they play a role in language developments. Um, in language development, but also in vocabulary and reading. Provide opportunities and talk prompts with the homework activities to help engage family members in discussions. Make family discussions a regular part of those weekly assignments, making sure that we provide the necessary support to avoid frustration. Um, so you can offer specific topics, questions, and vocabulary words that should be used. That helps like frame it out for them. Provide parents an accessible opportunity to respond if they have any concerns about their child's accuracy or just questions in general. This is also a great way to establish that homeschool connection that is so crucial for the success of all of our learners. The ultimate goal of reading instruction is to get our readers in a good place where they are reading silently at a good pace and understanding what they are reading. Developing a vast, strong vocabulary facilitates this goal. Explicit instruction in vocabulary, especially those critical words or academic vocabulary words, is essential for all of our learners. Make sure to include these learning experiences for our student. Make sure we include these learning experiences for our students to enhance their learning, but mostly provide those at-risk students the opportunity to build their word base, to build their knowledge and comprehend what they're reading. In this webinar series, we have examined all 5 of the essential components of reading instruction. Assessment and progress monitoring in all 5 of the components is necessary to provide targeted instruction in skill deficit areas or providing next steps for our learners. However you choose to assess, you want to be sure it does not take away too much of that valuable instruction time. The Lexplore Reading Assessment provides teachers with insight that goes unmatched, with those visual and audio recordings of each student. In addition, educators are provided with the real-time results, including grade level equivalency, reading levels, fluency scores, and much more. All of that happens in just a few minutes. The Lexplore assessment uses AI and eye tracking to provide these fast, accurate results. Okay, so there are many free downloadable resources available on our website for you. All of the partner share anchor charts and classroom management anchor charts can be found there. Also, we offer a set of free instant access activities and tools in phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and comprehension. In addition, there are many other resources such as webinars, blogs, trainings, and video tips on reading instruction in our Lunch with Lexplore series. So you want to be sure to head over to our website to check all of that out. And that's all we have for vocabulary this evening. Before we wrap up, Melissa, did we have any questions?
No, it doesn't look like we have any tonight. Great
Okay.
job.
So I'm going to post my contact information Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about any of our resources, the webinar series, or of course, our reading assessment. Thank you so much for spending time with us tonight and joining us in our special webinar series. Be sure to check out our social media and also the website for those free resources. Thanks so much and have a great night.